just like to welcome everybody out to our parent night tonight. This is the Life Launch Center's parenting workshop. And tonight it's all about stronger families and stronger futures. Tonight, we're talking about anxiety and attachment and how to overcome the disconnect today. And maybe a little bit of an introduction is, would be worthwhile. So first of all, my name is Joe Newman, and I am the Business Development Director here at Life Launch Centers. I take care of a lot of the media and a lot of the, all the website and stuff that you guys see around. And but tonight we have with us our clinical director, Steve Murdock. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I have been in therapy for about 5 years. Started out in the business world and decided to go back to school. Originally had a bachelor's degree in psychology, and when I was 49, I didn't like the job prospects. I think it was 2008. I've lost a few businesses, so hey, let's go back. My kids were getting a little older and going off to college themselves. I had time. So I went back to school and went to Walden University. They're in Minnesota. They have a blended format where you do half of your class online and the other half is face-to-face with the professors. And I did a dissertation and internship, a practicum, did the whole Ph.D. program there in about 5.5 years. So
you have a Ph.D. in clinical psychology, is that right?
Correct. Yes.
And then you're also a clinical mental health counselor. Those are the credentials that?
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, looking forward to your wealth of knowledge and experience and talking about this important topic tonight, because I think there's a lot of people interested in, first of all, anxiety is a big, a big problem today, and a lot of people wondering what we can do about it. But attachment, that's kind of a fairly less understood thing, but it was great talking to you as we were kind of getting to know the talking points and see how closely they are related. So how do you want to start with attachment? You had mentioned.
Let me just, Joe, I think we need to include depression in there, because 80% of the time depression and anxiety are comorbid, meaning that they're co-occurring. And I think what happens with anxiety is they start feeling guilty or something's wrong with me, and that makes them depressed.
Yeah.
So that's why you see such a high correlation between the two. And, we definitely see that a lot here. We got a lot of kids now with COVID just coming out of that who can't go be with their friends. They doing stuff over online all the time when there's no connection. And we're just seeing a really rise and increase in depression, anxiety. So I think in my mind, I kind of always look at those two together.
That makes a lot of sense. And when it comes to attachment, they're very closely related, right? So you mentioned there was a video that you wanted to kind of start with today.
Yeah, why don't we start with that? Go ahead and put that on.
Okay, let's pull that up here. It's called the still face experiment. This is very interesting, short video. It's about 2.5 minutes long. And it kind of will kick us off into the discussion about attachment.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother, to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Wow, very, very insightful. Tell me a little bit how this video, like applies to attachment and what we're going to talk about.
I think this is a really good representation of attachment issues, because we're always thinking about attachment, and which, attachment is your ability to connect with other people, your ability to form relationships that are meaningful to you rather than just people or an object to get me what I want. Attachment is, it's inherent, it's natural. We all want it, but when we struggle to get it, that's when we have a lot of problems. In fact, when I start hearing a teen is having problems with depression, my brain immediately goes to attachment. They're struggling probably to make connections with friends at school. We live in a lot harder world where there's more demands on parents, and they might not have the time. I think if you look at that baby at 1 year old was already having a lot of connection with mom, and they were like talking, and we probably don't really completely understand how much was going on there, but there was a ton. And what was interesting to me is that the baby was probably, you and I would probably get mad if somebody was doing that to us. We would get mad about that person. That person is treating me badly. But babies, they don't do that. They get mad at themselves. Something's wrong with me. They view the world based on the perception they feel from their parents. So a lot of the early research was about mothers, but now we're finding out fathers have just as much influence on their children as mothers do. And so
that's so interesting how it starts so young. Like, and there's this thing I see. I'm a parent, right? I've got 7 kids, and it's amazing how I see so many parents kind of take this ignoring approach to kids, whether it's at like the grocery store or at home, there's a lot of things that contribute to that. But culture today almost says to parents like, hey, if your kid's screaming and, acting out, then you should just ignore them. How does that affect attachment? From that video, it looks like it could severely affect it.
Yeah, that child feels like, oh, I'm not worth loving. I have no self-worth. There's evidence and theories that fundamental attachment can affect a baby's self-identity, and that's probably the major task of of adolescence, but it starts down there. Who am I? How am I going to interact with the world? How's the world going to interact with me? And when you have attachment issues, you're going to, if your baby has attachment issues, they're not going to trust the world. They're not going to trust adults. They're not going to learn to express themselves because nobody's listening, or they don't feel like anybody's listening. They're going to be hypersensitive to and misinterpret a lot of the world. Like that baby, mom's not paying attention to me. So the baby, gets really, really angry and misinterpreted probably what was going on there and blames themselves. Now, I always think, man, if the baby's acting like that when he's 1 year old, what's a teenager going to do when they're feeling like you're not listening to them?
Right. I mean, it's years and years of buildup. And I love the idea that you mentioned how when they're kids, they're so introspective, they're so intrinsic that like, they're not externalizing the cause, they're just like looking at themselves saying, I'm being ignored. That must mean I'm not worth loving. And years and years and years of that. Wow. I can only imagine how that, like you're saying, translates right into anxiety, depression.
When I was in residential treatment, we had 200 kids that were most of them were abused in some form. And there's different forms of abuse, but they all blamed themselves. It was just common. And so that was the thing that we were always trying to deal with is self-esteem.
Yeah.
Self-esteem, trusting adults, being able to express yourself. So I don't know where our points are.
Let's go to our next subject, because what are the different attachment styles? There's 4 attachment styles that you mentioned.
So the first guy that really started researching attachment was John Bowlby. He was a psychologist in Britain at the end of World War II, and he had all these orphans who weren't getting the parenting that they needed and then were neglected. And he started really looking at that because it was just so prevalent before his eyes. In fact, he thought that fundamental psychological processes such as self-efficacy, which is, a teenager becoming independent and being able to take care of themselves, their emotional development, because that's another thing you see in attachment problems. And I'm not saying that our population here that we're talking about tonight has dysfunctional problems, but they're in our treatment program. So there's something going on. And they, we probably, there's parents here that their kids aren't regulating their emotions very well. And so that can be affected by attachment issues. If a baby doesn't feel like the world's a safe place, they're not going to want to go out and explore. It's too frightening. So that anxiety is going to build up and they're just going to want to stay in the room and play video games and be on social media. So
that, does that represent in some of these attachment styles that you mentioned?
Yeah.
So you've got
Bowlby, and then later another psychologist named Mary Ainsworth did research, and they did research with 1-year-old babies. And they found that what they would do is the mother would play with the baby kind of like there, and then the mother would leave the room. And then what they were interested in watching was when the mother came back into the room, how the baby responded when the baby came back in the room. And so you had like a healthy attachment, which they called a secure attachment. The baby would go back to mom. Oh, I missed you. And then, good. And then go back to playing. And then you had like an avoidant ambivalence where, actually anxious ambivalence, anxious avoidance, or 2 different styles. So the baby's like, oh, I don't know who you are, and would ignore mom. And then, or they would be, so ambivalent, they would be back and forth, really.
Maybe didn't even care that mom had entered the room again.
Yeah. Just kind of, you're not here. Avoidant, they would yeah, mom's here, but I ain't gonna
Yeah, I'm not
interact
going
with
to
her.
her, right?
Yeah. And then you had the disorganized, which was just all over the board. They didn't know because, and this was probably the attachment style that, and really when they're measuring and doing research, they're just looking at patterns and they could see these four distinct patterns that the babies were showing. There's a lot of research that goes along with that. They've tracked people into adulthood. They've gone to adults who showed these styles and asked them about their experience with their parents. So
I see. I think you can see that expressed in a lot of teenage relationships with parents, right? You've got some teenagers that are secure around their parents. They enjoy being around them, and that's okay. Ambivalent that are just kind of like, yeah, I could care less about my parents. A lot of teenagers are maybe more in that avoidant area where they want to like stay away from their parents, and then disorganized where they're just dysfunctional, I guess. Is that how we can that in teenage behavior?
We need to be careful here. They kind of tied this to like how the mother was treating the baby, but I don't think that's really accurate because, I've seen this with kids where, there's a bunch of siblings that are, like a secure attachment where this one, there's some genetics in there.
So there's a lot more factors than just how they were treated as a baby is what you're saying.
Yeah, there could be stressors in the family that baby, like, I was watching a kind of a scenario today where like a father dies and the older kids already have a secure foundation, but the younger kids didn't grow up with it. And now mother has to go to work. So they don't get it. And you think about divorce, it's kind of the same thing. The stressors that just in our society is so complex. It's easy for kids to go to numbing behavior, which we talk about in the resiliency model.
This conversation is so relevant because I think you see this probably more common than not, actually. Like, I guess the question is, so like you were talking about, how do people get attachment issues? It's not just how they were treated as babies. There could be some things that happen later in life. Maybe even bullying and how life experiences that are individual rather than familial, right? Like,
most of my experience comes with like trauma, abuse, like severe abuse, physical, sexual, psychological abuse, where those kids are really, your heart goes out to them.
So abuse is a pretty common onset way that.
Yeah. And it's severe attachment. They don't trust adults. They can't express their emotions. I started to see it in a lot of kids. It can look like ADHD. It can look like bipolar because these kids, they turn off their emotions because it hurts. It's painful if you're being neglected or abused and you feel like it's your fault. So a lot of them aren't emotionally regulated. There's different things that they can do. Strategies. They don't learn how to develop some really healthy strategies for dealing with problems in the world because they're not secure. The world's a scary place. So they just kind of want to hide and numb from themselves. But I've also, as I've studied it, there were a lot of kids where okay, this kid was adopted at 6 months by a bio mom, was doing drugs and, was still addicted to drugs the first 6 months. So, that kid, it's
might have some issues.
Yeah, you're pretty sure. But I also think that stuff can happen in the womb. We're finding out now that babies can recognize their mother's voice in the womb at 7 months of age. Their heart rate will increase if they hear their mother's voice.
That's pretty amazing.
If at 3 months 2 months, if we know about drugs, if mother's doing drugs, it can just really mess up a baby. With fetal alcohol syndrome, which is drugs, alcohol, but also stress and trauma on the mother can affect the baby. Heart rates go up and they can feel that the mother's stressed. So
Wow. So yeah.
Stuff in attachment could be happening in the womb. But a lot of times, it was evident. A lot of the kids in the treatment center where I worked were adopted. But then we also had kids who were, you're just like really healthy parents who loved them and cared about them, were trying everything they could think of and just were beyond their wits and had no clue. And everything seemed to be fine. You couldn't figure out. And so sometimes there might just be a genetic predisposition for feeling, the brain just is developed that way.
Or maybe individual experience at school and things that the
could
parents
be,
can't account for.
Kid doesn't want to tell us about his trauma from bullying. We don't know.
Yeah.
But there's a wide spectrum of how attachment develops.
So, and we also talk about how it affects you throughout the lifespan because, whether it's something that happens when you're young through abuse or like these other methods that you talked about, it seems to carry on throughout life and have effects throughout the lifespan. Is that right? How do you see that? Is that like, how does that affect marriage? How does that affect relationships long-term,
They're probably going to cycle through marriages. They're going to struggle in all their relationships. They're not going to look at people as somebody to connect with and to fulfill their emotional needs. People are more like objects that they can get what they think they need, which, it could be attention. It could be self-enhancement. So,
I gotta say, like, this is really interesting conversation for me because as I was a kid, most people are pretty surprised to find this out, but I was heavily bullied because I wore glasses, and since I was like a little kid, 1 year old. And just now I've realized, and I've had a lot of discussions with my wife, how I have a tendency to want to just like if somebody hurts me, that I can just really quickly say, well, I don't need you, like we can end this relationship right now, and thankfully my wife and I have a really healthy and strong marriage, but realizing that about myself because of my individual experience when I was a kid, it does still affect me as an adult.
Yeah. And here's the other thing. Everybody has some level of attachment issue. We're all, not everybody can trust everybody all the time. We're always have our criteria, and it's all different from everybody. So we're all like judging people. Okay, can I trust this person that's coming to my life? Maybe we're testing them, or maybe we can be, very trusting. But everybody has their criteria and their difficulty trusting new people and setting boundaries for people, expressing their emotions.
Yeah.
So really that's kind of where the resiliency model really comes in.
Well, I feel like we're kind of swimming in it here. So let's get to what do we do? Like, how do you actually overcome attachment issues? Is like you said, so many of us have different experiences and things. Well, we got to know what to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so really we're trying to help these kids find themselves. We can do it through helping them learn how to set goals. Goals are how kids take ownership of themselves and their lives instead of blaming everybody else.
That's one of the first things that we do with clients at Life Launch Centers is help them establish their values and then set some healthy goals that will help move them towards those values.
Yeah. And so that's what we're teaching, like sensation emotions. We try to teach kids how to recognize, and parents can be really good about helping kids figure out their emotions. You saw that little baby. If the mom kept doing that as the baby growing up, would start shutting down those emotions because it's painful to see your mom not respond to you. Yeah. And so what we try to do is get kids to recognize their emotions and that they're okay. Go with the flow, and sensation and emotion are both about emotions. Sometimes emotions are hard and it's okay. They can be good. They can help us motivate us. They can help us look at things differently. So they're good, but they can also get out of control. So, parents can be like almost detectives in trying to help their kids identify what they're feeling, setting goals to explore the world a little bit and hold their hands out there.
Yeah, I've realized that I've had to do this with my kids too, where they're just not used to expressing emotion, especially verbally. It seems like with text and emojis and all these supplements of being, trying to express emotion in low, vulnerable ways, that they have a severe disadvantage in being able to pick and identify their emotions. And then
Yeah.
that it's okay, like you said, to go with the flow or to sit with those emotions, to let them know that, every emotion has a helpful and a harmful side to it. So let's evaluate that emotion you're feeling right now. Is it being helpful for you, or is it harmful for you right now?
Yeah. And that's where we're all through the model. We're checking our intensity. Is this good? Is this right? Can I think about this in a calm way, in a rational mind with the prefrontal cortex? Really with emotionals, you're looking at two types. And we all do this. We have primary and secondary emotions. Primary emotions are the ones that make us feel vulnerable. So I'm embarrassed. I'm sad. That person hurt my feelings. That person is not accepting me. That person is judging me. And we all have those kind of feelings. And those are primary emotions. But those are hard to express. They take some ego strength. And so usually what we all see, especially with teenagers, is the secondary emotions. So if you see a teenager that's is hurt, what you're going to see is anger. And so as a parent, if you can see and go back a little bit further and try to figure out what the primary emotion, help them express that, identify it, then they can start to kind of join the world of healthy strategies for solving problems, and they'll listen to you more. If they're yelling at you because they're angry, what are you going to do? You're going to get
yell
defensive.
back. Almost.
Yeah, you're going to yell back. You're going to get hijacked. You're going to shut down, withdraw, and that's just going to accentuate it. But if you can accept that your teenager is feeling something, if you can identify what it is, this is a primary emotion, and help them feel secure. It's okay. I remember feeling that way. Then that teenager can become more secure and can try to solve that problem.
And really what we're talking about is that you're building connections with them.
Yep.
You're helping them realize, like, okay, I can appreciate the emotion you're experiencing right now. I'm willing to sit here with you with that emotion. And because you experience it together, you build connections.
Yep. And even the, solving problems. What's a problem? What is this problem? Can I solve this problem? Those are things that if your teenager's expressing secondary emotions and you're responding in kind, they're not going to want your help. Your help is just going to be another judgment. You don't trust me to solve my own problem.
That makes total sense. Yeah. And that's the hard part, I guess, is you have to almost step back from the situation and address it as a neutral third party, right? So you're not making all the judgment and making them feel bad. I got to just say, like, as a parent, that's really, really hard, right? Like, I hope all the parents out there know, like, we're talking about some really emotionally mature stuff that we as parents have to exercise, much less ask our kids to,
Yeah. And that's the hard part about being a parent, is you want to be nurturing, but yet you also want them to keep the rules, and finding that balance is really tough to do. Right. And so, I'm a parent. I have kids. They're older. They survived me. So I learned a lot of this after they were ready. So well,
and we're talking about some pretty, some pretty complex concepts here. And I just want to make sure everybody who's on knows that there's a lot more explanation about what we're talking about. The Life Launch Center's resilience model has 8 steps to go through this, and it's a combination of a lot of different really powerful clinical principles out there, but there's a lot more resources on our website. Like we can't go into like every point tonight, but there are other videos and like radio shows and articles on our website that will go deeper into those concepts if you're, wanting some more info from that. But so I guess, our last subject or conversation here, I think we've kind of really already covered it, but let's talk a little bit more to just the whole anxiety and depression, attachment issues. What do we do now? What would you offer these parents that have jumped on?
I think those are secondary emotions.
Anxiety and depression are secondary emotions?
Yeah. What's making your kid depressed? Well, nobody likes me. The kids all call me fat. They're teasing me. They're bullying me. So that's the primary emotion. Those are the ones that are weak and they're hard for teenagers to express. And so, it's for me, I would look at it as an opportunity for me to really put my arms around my child. If you can get through that secondary emotion and really try to understand what they're going through and just be empathetic and try to help them figure out how they can get through that. Anxiety is about worried about the future. Oh, this person's going to judge me. Depression is probably more about the past. So we teach a lot about mindfulness, which research just showing it can really change your brain dramatically. If you're neurology now, science is teaching us that our brain is actually malleable. It changes biologically, structurally, it changes. So whatever we're practicing, we do. Our brain changes that way. So if you're depressed and you're thinking negatively all the time, your brain's going to go there, and it's going to get easier to do that, and it's going to get harder to get out of that. Anxiety is the same. So mindfulness is a way and an exercise that can train your brain to observe those things, but to come back here in a healthy, positive manner. And doing that will change your brain back. Changes the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and the connection between the two. So
that's really important. I want to make sure everybody out there understood this, because we've been talking about attachment and all the, issues, but what you're saying, you're referring to neuroplasticity. Is that what I think the name that I've heard talk about? How
neuroplasticity. Yep.
Yeah. Like your brain does relearn. It's a total different concept than what we learned when we were kids about, you're burning all your brain cells and this is your brain on drugs and there's no more, hope for you ever. But that's
they
actually
know now that your brain can actually develop new neurons. So
throughout the lifespan, if you have attachment issues, if your kids have attachment issues, if they've had some things in the past, that's great for hope, right? Like we can actually rewire the brain, like you're talking about, with some, mindfulness practices, like you talked about. There's a bunch of stuff on our website about mindfulness to get a better understanding of what that is. It's kind of a mild form of meditation. It's actual like exercises for your brain. Yeah, as well as a lot of different DBT skills, distress tolerance tools, things that we teach as well.
Yeah, I think if I was going to summarize all this, it's that when we're looking at mood, I think typically psychologists, therapists will go, oh, let's give you some preventative measures. Here's some coping skills for your depression. So I like trying to deal with attachment. We usually like deal with ruptures. What's going on? What triggered you? And what does that mean to the teenager, to the child? What does that mean to the parent? Is it a vulnerable emotion? Is it a secondary emotion? And how can we help you deal with that? How can we have compassion with that? So I would just look at mood generally now as, I need to help my kid with their relationships.
Just wanted to thank everybody for jumping on. Again, if there's more questions, if you've got more want more information, please jump on our website at lifelaunchcenters.com. There's a tab in the media that will bring up our radio shows as well as other workshops that we've done similar to this. And they really go into depth with all of these concepts that we're talking about. But I think the real message today is that there's hope. Like we got to understand the problem, like attachment, but realizing that there is hope. And I think that's the greatest message that we're trying to spread, that, we're out here working hard to try to help have stronger families and stronger futures, get these principles out to everybody, so that we can all be happier, right? So, Steve, any last words? Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to give you the last word
No, I think there is hope, even with the severely attached kids. We're talking about, some severe stories. There was still hope. There, it might be a foreign language to them, but they can speak it. They can learn to attach. It might take a while to get there. There's no magic pill for that. But I don't think we're dealing with that here. But I think the relationship between mood and relationships is something that I was trying to stress here tonight for our parents is that if your kid's depressed or anxious, try to figure out what's going on. It could be just something at school with their friends. Could be something maybe that they've misinterpreted about their relationship with you. It could be a host of things. But there is hope.
Again, hope everybody learned something. And most of all, hope you learned that there's hope, that there is a lot of great information, and we're still learning a lot of important things in the world of psychology that can help families grow stronger and help us have stronger futures. So thanks again for joining us, and hope you jump on next month. Keep an eye open for our announcements for our parent workshop next month. Thank you so much.